Story 1. Greenland sharks can live up to 500 years. They do not reach sexual maturity until they are over 100 years old. When pregnant, gestation lasts up to 18 years. Story 2. Some worms were frozen solid for over 40,000 years in Siberian permafrost, and then some scientists revived them. They were not actually dead, just resting. Story 3. Koala's entire diet consists of eucalyptus tree leaves, which are incredibly toxic. Baby koalas aren't born with any immunity to the toxins. They gain this immunity by eating their mother's feces. Story 4. Losing weight? When your body burns fat for energy, that mass is primarily converted into carbon dioxide. On a calorie deficit, the excess weight is expelled from your body through breathing. You are getting slimmer by exhaling. Story 5. There are 52 factorial ways to arrange the cards in a standard playing card deck. That is 52 times 51 times 50, and so on, down to 1, which equals 86 quintillion, 581 quadrillion, 751 trillion, 709 billion, 438 million, 785,716. This number is larger than the total number of atoms in the entire Milky Way galaxy. This means that every time any deck is shuffled randomly, it is most likely ending up in an order that has never occurred before since the invention of playing cards and never will again. Story 6. If global fraud were consolidated into a single entity, it would be the third largest financial entity in the world, behind the United States and China. Story 7. Growing and selling cannabis is not actually legal in the Netherlands. There is only a tolerance policy for selling cannabis in coffee shops. Coffee shops obtain their cannabis through illegal means, as there are no legal avenues available. Story 8. Woolly mammoths did not go extinct until 1,000 years after the Great Pyramids of Giza were built. Story 9. If the Andromeda Galaxy were not dim in our night sky, it would appear about 6 times as large as the moon. This fact also applies to various other celestial objects. Story 10. Texas is not the largest state. If you cut Alaska in half, Texas would be the third largest state. Story 11. If you earned $5,000 an hour, 24 hours a day from the time the pyramids in Egypt were constructed until today, the world's richest person would still have more money than you. Story 12. Mitsubishi provides all the equipment necessary to operate a plastic molding factory, including the raw plastic resin. Story 13. The largest air force in the world is the United States Air Force. The second largest air force in the world is the United States Navy. Story 14. Rock hyraxes, also called dassies or rock rabbits, are small, stub-tailed animals native to Africa. Though they resemble rodents, their closest living relatives are actually elephants and manatees. Story 15. At the time General Custer had his last stand against the Native American tribes in the West, the Brooklyn Bridge was just being completed. Story 16. It takes 1,000 years for a photon to travel from the center of the sun to its surface. Then, it only takes 8 minutes and 20 seconds to reach Earth. Story 17. Every time I hear something about the duck-billed platypus, I am convinced it shouldn't be a real animal. Story 18. There are fossil records of ancient whales that used to walk on land with legs before they evolved to live in the ocean. Some species still have vestigial toes in their flippers. Story 19. A million seconds is 12 days, and a billion seconds is 31 years. That is the difference between a millionaire and a billionaire. Story 20. Knowing how high 100 meters is as we install equipment on towers, I cannot believe how incredibly long a wind turbine single blade is, starting at around 50 meters and extending beyond 100 meters. That's just unbelievable. Story 21. Wayne Gretzky is the only player to score 200 points in a season, and he achieved this 4 times. He would still be the National Hockey League's all-time points leader even if he had never scored a goal, as he has more assists than the combined total of assists and goals by the next best player. Story 22. The bacteria that break down cellulose, which makes up plant cell walls, took hundreds of millions of years to evolve and become common around the world. Before that, dead plants would lie on the ground, sink into it, get compressed by the material above them, and eventually turn into fossil fuels. Story 23. If you transplant one man's testicles to another man, they will function and can still produce offspring from the original donor. Story 24. When Cortez met the Aztecs, the last common ancestor they shared predates agriculture. When he arrived at the independent civilization, he found kings, priests, merchants, and tax collectors just like back home. Story 25. The only reason we cannot hear the sun is that sound does not travel in space. If we could hear it, it would be over 100 decibels. Story 26. The birthday paradox. In a room of just 23 people, there is a 50% chance of at least 2 people sharing the same birthday. In a room of 75 people, there is a 99.9% chance of at least 2 people having matching birthdays. Story 27. If you gathered all the HIV viruses from every infected person in the world, it would only fill a teaspoon. Story 28. 30 to 50% of people do not have internal monologues. A friend told me this the other day, and I was honestly surprised to find out he was correct. Story 29. The animal with the longest sperm, though not proportionally, is the Drosophila melanogaster, a type of fruit fly. Story 30. Several episodes of British TV shows, including early Doctor Who and Dad's Army, that were thought to be lost after tapes were reused by the BBC were found in Bob Monkhouse's shed after his passing. Story 31. The Parker Space Probe, the fastest man-made object in history, travels at approximately 400,000 miles per hour. At this speed, it would take about 6,600 years to reach Proxima Centauri, the closest star to our planet after the Sun. Story 32. Venus is the closest planet to Earth at its shortest distance, which is not surprising. However, the planet that Earth spends the most time closest to is Mercury, due to Mars and Venus sometimes being on the other side of the Sun, which is also not surprising. Interestingly, Mercury is also the closest planet to every other planet, including Venus and extending to Neptune, and yes, even Pluto. Story 33. The reason there are many caves in the Appalachian Mountains without fossils is that they formed before the evolution of bones. Story 34. In the Middle Ages, when there was no light pollution or air pollution, the Milky Way was so bright that you could walk by its light on a moonless night, and by the light of the moon when it was up. Story 35. Jimi Hendrix's 3 studio albums, Are You Experienced?, Axis, Bold as Love, and Electric Ladyland, were recorded in a span of just over a year and a half amidst constant touring and a busy press and publicity schedule. Story 36. You have to hit a chicken at 3,725.95 miles per hour to cook it. Additionally, you would need to sacrifice approximately 370 people to obtain enough iron from their blood to forge a sword. Story 37. The Outerbridge Crossing, from Staten Island to New Jersey, is named after Eugenius Harvey Outerbridge, the former chairman of the New York Port Authority. It is also the bridge in New York City that is furthest from the center of the city. Story 38. Norman Borlaug is personally responsible for saving the lives of over 1 billion people due to his development of food technology. Story 39. That Macaulay Culkin's middle name is Macaulay. His name is Macaulay Culkin. Story 40. John Tyler, the 10th President of the United States, born in 1790, still has a living grandson, Harrison Ruffin Tyler. Story 41. In the 4 years of the invasion, the Nazis killed more people in the Soviet Union than the Soviet Union lost through famine, civil wars, and purges, from the start of the Russian Civil War in 1917 to the beginning of Operation Barbarossa in 1941. Story 42. So many people died during the Lushan Rebellion from 755 to 763 AD that it reduced the entire Earth's human population by an estimated 10 to 15%. Story 43. Approximately 95% of goods imported into the United Kingdom arrive by ship. People often struggle to believe this and think that everything must come by plane, despite seeing shipping crates for days if they have ever been near a port. This perception also contributes to a widespread belief that the United Kingdom does not require a navy because we do not engage in wars at sea anymore. Story 44. If you were to start shuffling a deck of cards a billion years ago, 1 shuffle per second until now, every shuffle would result in a unique order of those cards, never seen before. This means that whenever you shuffle a deck of cards, It is the first time in human history that that particular order of cards has ever been seen. Story 45. And Frank, Martin Luther King Jr., and Barbara Walters were all born in 1929. Betty White was born 7 years earlier in 1922. Story 46. When I was in high school, I took a statistics class where they taught that statistics could be made to look like whatever you wanted. The biggest example was that 1 out of 5 deadly accidents was due to drunk drivers. An argument was made that it was safer to drive while drunk than to drive sober. Obviously, this is misleading, but statistics justified the claim, and the whole point of the class was to show how easily statistics can be manipulated. Story 47. $1 million is 0.1% of $1 billion. If you subtract $1 million from $1 billion, the amount remaining 99.9% of $1 billion is still approximately $1 billion. In terms of wealth, a millionaire is much closer to a working-class person than to a billionaire. Story 48. Running can cause iron deficiency because the rhythmic motion of running physically destroys your hemoglobin. Story 49. If there were a rock-paper-scissors tournament with every single person on the planet competing, and losers being eliminated each round, you would only have to win 33 times to beat everyone on Earth. Story 50. Fact about CRT computer screens, including televisions, from the 1980s and 1990s. A screen designed for the market in the Northern Hemisphere cannot be used in the Southern Hemisphere without modification. The picture quality would be unsatisfactory as it is. Explanation. The cathode is aligned with the magnetic pole, either north or south. If the factory alignment is for north, the screen will be out of focus if the south pole is closer. If you connect a Northern Hemisphere monitor to a computer in the Southern Hemisphere and flip the monitor upside down, it will be back in focus. The cathode is a high-voltage device. To fix it if it ends up in the wrong hemisphere, a skilled person would open it up and rotate the cathode 180 degrees. Story 51. Cristiano Ronaldo is 869 days older than Lionel Messi. Cristiano's firstborn child is also exactly 869 days older than Messi's first child. They competed back and forth for soccer records but had their first children at the exact same age, down to the day. Story 52. If we started killing humans at the same rate we kill land animals for food, we would make the human race extinct in 17 days. If we did it at the rate we kill fish and land animals, it would take 27 hours. Story 53. There are more women divorcing their husbands to be with a woman than men divorcing their wives to be with a man. This was just a fun statistic I learned in sexology. I received a lot of negative feedback in my direct messages. Thank you, Internet. Story 54. Dinosaurs lived on the other side of the galaxy. Story 55. There are 9 species of humans that we know of, and we are the last surviving species. We have spent over 90% of our time as hunter-gatherers and have existed for a relatively short period. Homo erectus, for example, lasted about 2 million years before becoming extinct. Homo sapiens, in comparison, have been around for only about 300,000 years. It is known that we interbred with Neanderthals and passed some of their genetics down the line as a result. Some modern diseases, like Crohn's disease, may be due to our ancient ancestors mating with Neanderthals. Additionally, we suspect that climate change may have contributed to other extinctions. Story 56. Most insects grow larger or smaller depending on the oxygen content of the air. About 300 million years ago, Earth's atmosphere was particularly rich at 31% oxygen, which is about 50% more than today's level. During that time, there were dragonflies the size of hawks and massive insect life everywhere. Scientists have raised insects in various atmospheric mixtures and have proven this, along with evidence from the fossil record. Story 57. The policy allowing banks to use race as a factor to deny housing loans was overturned the year before the release of Star Wars. This is a significant reason why previous generations of black families were unable to build wealth and were forced to rent instead. Story 58. If you were to cut the Earth into tiny 1 meter wide, 1 meter long, and 1 meter deep chunks and put those chunks side by side, the length of that 1 meter by 1 meter path would be longer than the Milky Way galaxy. Story 59. If you dug a hole in the ground from one side of the Earth to the other in a straight line and measured the distance as you go, you would get a longer diameter than what we can measure from the outside. Why? Because the Earth's gravity bends spacetime, making a mile that is closer to the core smaller than a mile that is further from it. Yet, the mile would still be a mile long. Additionally, time would flow at a different rate than on the surface. Story 60. Wayne Gretzky would still be the National Hockey League all-time points leader if you removed all of his goals. Let that sink in. He has more goals than anyone in history, and even if you took them all away, he would still have the most points. Another fact about Gretzky: the fastest player in National Hockey League history to reach 1,000 points was Wayne Gretzky. He did it a second time at an even faster pace. No other player has ever reached 2,000 points. Story 61. If you take a rope and wrap it around the Earth, and then decide you want to raise the rope 1 foot above the Earth so that the entire rope now circles the Earth 1 foot high, how much additional rope would you need? Only 6.28 feet. Story 62. Routine vaccinations exist to prevent disability, not death. The case fatality for measles, mumps, rubella, chickenpox, polio, and COVID-19 is very low compared to the burden of disability in survivors. For example, virtually no one dies of mumps, but a boy can become sterilized by it. Diseases with a high case fatality, such as rabies and HIV, are typically not covered by routine vaccination. Story 63. The RMS Titanic is famous primarily because it sank. It wasn't the first of its class like the RMS Olympic, nor was it as large as the RMS Britannic. Story 64. A Cadbury flake cannot be melted. You can place that chocolate in a microwave, put it in a pan, or even set it on fire, and it will not melt. Story 65. The last ice age ended about 15,000 to 25,000 years ago. That's relatively recent in the grand scheme of things. Story 66. You can use Fibonacci numbers to convert between miles and kilometers. Take 2 consecutive Fibonacci numbers, such as 21 and 34. 21 miles is approximately 34 kilometers. This method can also be applied to distances that are not Fibonacci numbers. The number 100 can be expressed as a sum of Fibonacci numbers: 89, 8, and 3. The Fibonacci number following 89 is 144, the number following 8 is 13, and the number following 3 is 5. Therefore, the sum is 144 plus 13 plus 5, which equals 162 kilometers in 100 miles. Story 67. Centipedes and millipedes were among the first land dwellers and have remained mostly unchanged. Due to this, they lack some of the more useful adaptations, such as compound eyes. Their biggest advantage was that they could breathe on land, an edge which they have lost. Story 68. There were shipwrecks in 1664, 1785, and 1820. Each had one survivor named Hugh Williams. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.